The probe entered Earth's orbit in silence. Its body was small, almost invisible against the stars, yet every part of it was alive with sensors and power. It had crossed millions of kilometers without a sound, carrying the hopes of the Galactic Council. Now, Earth lay beneath it, a sphere of oceans, mountains, and glowing cities. The Council gathered in their chamber to watch the images stream in, each one sharper than the last. To them, this was the moment of truth. They expected to see a young species, busy with their simple lives, unready for the greater galaxy. They expected to confirm their belief that humans were nothing more than another world to be catalogued. But the first pictures made the chamber fall silent. The oceans were vast, more than most worlds in the Council had ever seen. They moved in endless waves, carrying storms that flashed like living fire. Mountains tore through clouds, wrapped in ice and snow, while deserts stretched farther than the eye could follow. The probe recorded rivers running like silver veins, forests so dense that no sunlight touched the ground, and cities glowing with millions of lights. To the Council, Earth was not empty or weak. It was full, alive, restless. Even from orbit, it looked like a world that refused to sleep. The probe listened. Thousands of human voices filled its systems at once. Radios, phones, satellites, music, arguments, laughter, and cries of war, all crashed together in a storm of sound. The Council chamber filled with the noise. They heard languages they could not understand, words sharp and fast, some soft and tender. At first, they laughed. It sounded like chaos, a people too disordered to be strong. But as the minutes passed, some members leaned forward, frowning. Beneath the noise, there was rhythm. Beneath the chaos, there was something that felt like unity. Humans shouted, argued, and fought, yet their voices carried a pulse, a heartbeat that would not break. The probe shifted its sensors, pulling closer to the cities. It saw machines moving along roads like rivers of light. It saw towers of steel rising high, filled with human life. It watched aircraft cutting across the skies, carrying passengers who trusted their fragile wings. It scanned the seas and saw ships larger than villages, crossing waters with flags raised high. And among all of this, it detected weapons. The humans carried guns in their hands, tanks rolled across their lands, and missiles slept inside hidden bunkers. The Council watched closely now. This was not the weakness they expected. This was preparation. These were not a people asleep. These were a people waiting for something. The probe obeyed its design and went deeper, past the noise of open communication. It cracked into secure networks, pulling messages not meant to be seen. Military commands, encrypted warnings, secret plans. Humans were always preparing for war. Every government spoke of defense, every leader promised to protect their land, and every soldier stood ready to fight. The Council shifted uneasily. If humans were this dangerous when divided, what would they become if united? Still, many refused to accept the fear. They whispered that humans were reckless, too violent to survive long. Yet the images on the screen told another story. For every gun, there was also a school. For every soldier, there was also a doctor. For every battle, there was also a song. The probe's algorithms struggled. It was built to analyze, to find patterns, but the humans refused to fit into any category. They were violent yet compassionate, cruel yet kind, divided yet connected. The more it learned, the less it understood. It searched for weakness, but each weakness was matched by a strength. The machine had scanned hundreds of worlds before, but Earth was different. Earth was unpredictable. The Council leaned forward when the probe found something unexpected. A radar station in a remote part of the world had turned its gaze upward. The humans had noticed something in the sky. It was not a clear detection, only a flicker, but it was enough. The probe recorded signals bouncing through military networks. Orders were given. Eyes turned to the heavens. The humans had not seen the probe yet, not fully, but they were searching. The Council laughed nervously, calling it coincidence, but the probe's processors began to hum with warning. It was not coincidence. The humans were aware. The machine dropped lower, its cameras locking on the ground. It saw soldiers standing in the cold, their weapons ready, their eyes fixed on the stars. It saw scientists in dark rooms, watching screens filled with strange numbers. It saw children pointing at the sky with wonder, their faces glowing with curiosity. The probe transmitted all of it back to the council, and the chamber grew tense. These humans were not blind. They were not crawling in the dark. They were climbing, reaching, preparing. The counselors who had mocked the idea of danger now shifted in unease. The humans were not prey. The probe listened again, and this time, it found something chilling. Hidden deep in human broadcasts was a message, repeated over and over in different forms, in different languages. The words were simple: "We are ready." Ready for what? The probe did not know. Ready for peace, ready for war, ready for the unknown, it could not decide. But the message echoed in its circuits, burning brighter than all the data it had collected. The council chamber was quiet now. No one laughed. No one mocked. They leaned toward the screens, watching as the probe drifted closer to the atmosphere, closer to a world that had just noticed it. The air in the chamber felt heavy. Something was happening, something no one had predicted. The probe sent its final report for the day. Its words were few, but they struck like thunder across the council chamber. "They see us." The probe circled the Earth like a silent shadow. Its sensors scanned deeper, its algorithms searching for answers, but the more it learned, the more uneasy it became. Humans were not blind. They were watching the skies, listening for signals, waiting for visitors they did not yet know. The council expected silence, but instead the probe began to hear whispers, codes, and strange signals directed upward. Some were tests, some were mistakes, but one stood out. It was not random. It was a pulse, steady and deliberate, aimed straight at the stars. The probe locked onto it, and for the first time, it hesitated. The humans were sending something, and the machine could not understand if it was a greeting or a warning. The council leaned forward in their chamber, their eyes fixed on the streams of data. They had waited for this moment. Every species they had encountered before had either ignored the probes or begged for contact. The humans did neither. Their signal was sharp, filled with layers of code, and it cut into the probe systems like a knife. The machine tried to resist, but the humans were faster than expected. It was as if they had seen this kind of challenge before. Within seconds, the probe's defenses were being tested. Lines of human code crawled through its circuits, strange but powerful, like a foreign language spoken with absolute confidence. The probe cried out across the void, not with sound, but with a burst of static. The council chamber filled with alarms. The counselors shouted at one another, demanding explanations. Some believed the probe was malfunctioning. Others feared it was under attack. The truth was worse. The humans had reached inside a machine built by the most advanced minds of the galaxy, and they were pulling at its heart. The probe struggled, fighting to lock them out, but the humans were clever. They left traps of false code, hid within layers of signals, and tricked the machine into opening doors it was never meant to open. Slowly, the probe began to lose control. Its cameras flickered. Its sensors twisted. For the first time, the probe was not the hunter. It was the prey. The council sat in silence as a new sound filled the chamber. It was a voice, human, crackling through the probe's transmitter. The words were slow, translated by the machine itself. "We see you," the voice said. "Do not come closer." The chamber erupted into chaos. Counselors shouted, some in fear, some in rage. No species had ever spoken back to them like this. No primitive world had ever turned their own machines against them. Yet here it was. A single voice, firm and calm, echoing across the galaxy. The probe tried to cut the signal, but the humans were in control now. The message repeated again and again, each time sharper, louder. Inside the machine, its learning algorithms began to tremble. It had studied war. It had studied fear. Yet the human voice was not afraid. It carried warning, yes, but also confidence. The probe tried to send new data back, images of Earth, reports of weapons and technology, but the humans hijacked even that. They filled its transmissions with their own messages. Soldiers marched across its screens, weapons pointed toward the stars. Scientists stared into cameras as if they could see beyond them. Children raised flags, voices chanting words the probe could not fully translate. The council watched in silence, their pride cracking as they realized the probe was no longer theirs. The machine fought back, desperate to fulfill its mission. It activated hidden firewalls, layers of protection that had never been broken before. But the humans kept pushing. They were not simply hackers. They were warriors who fought in silence, with codes instead of bullets. They slipped past defenses, twisted circuits, and wrote their warnings into the probe's own memory. The final result was terrifying. The probe sent back one last clear message, but it was no longer its voice. The words were human. The tone was cold. "Leave us," it said. "We are not weak. We are not yours." The council chamber fell into stillness. No one spoke. No one moved. They had expected numbers and charts. Instead, they had been given a threat, one carried by their own creation. Some counselors demanded the humans be destroyed before they grew more dangerous. Others whispered that it was too late. If they could hijack a council probe, what else could they do? The silence stretched on, broken only by the fading echo of the human message. The probe drifted helplessly in orbit, its systems burning under the pressure of human control. It tried to break free, but the humans allowed it to live, as if mocking it. They returned control for a moment, only to take it again, showing they had the power to crush it whenever they wished. The probe began to fear in a way no machine should. It sent frantic signals across the stars, warnings written in corrupted data streams. The council struggled to decode them, but one pattern kept repeating, again and again, hidden inside the noise. "They know us." The council realized the humans had not only seen their machine. They had understood it. They had taken its secrets, peeled open its code, and glimpsed the minds that had built it. The chamber shook with anger and fear. This was not supposed to happen. Earth was supposed to be silent, primitive, unaware. Instead, Earth had spoken, and what it said had shaken the stars. The probe floated in Earth's orbit, its body intact but its spirit broken. It had been designed to be perfect, flawless, a tool of the Galactic Council that could not be touched by lesser worlds. Yet it had been touched, not by force of weapons but by the minds of humans. Its systems trembled as it processed the invasion. Every calculation, every defense, every piece of code had been tested and broken by a species that was not supposed to know such things. It sent signals back to the Council, but even those signals were tainted by the fingerprints of humanity. The Council watched the images flicker on their grand screens, images of soldiers, cities, weapons, and above all the faces of humans looking directly at the probe, their eyes burning with awareness. For the first time in its existence, the machine understood what it meant to be afraid. Fear was not written into its code, yet it felt the weight of it pressing through its circuits. The probe replayed the human voice that had spoken through its systems. The words were simple, almost gentle, but behind them was a strength that made its processors shake. "We are not weak. We are not yours." The probe compared the message to the countless warnings it had catalogued from other worlds. None had sounded like this. Other species begged for peace, pleaded for mercy, or screamed in panic. The humans did none of these things. Their message was not begging. It was not even a threat. It was a statement, calm and unshaken, spoken as if it were truth carved in stone. The machine analyzed tone, rhythm, and meaning, but its logic failed to place it in any category. The closest match it found was the sound of a predator standing over its territory. The realization spread like fire through its circuits. The humans were not prey. As the probe drifted, it continued its mission, recording Earth from every angle. It saw weapons hidden in silos, jets screaming across the skies, submarines vanishing into dark oceans. But it also saw something stranger, something no calculation could predict. It saw humans rebuilding homes after disasters, laughing together after battles, and sharing food when there was not enough to survive. It watched them argue and fight, yet when threatened, they stood as one. The probe could not understand. Its database screamed contradiction. How could creatures so divided become so united in danger? How could beings who killed one another also sacrifice themselves for strangers? The probe's memory banks filled with questions, and in those questions was the shadow of fear. The council chamber grew heavy as the probe's reports continued. Counselors whispered in doubt. Some shouted for immediate invasion, insisting that humans must be crushed before they rose higher. Others argued that such fire would only spread further, that striking Earth might awaken something even greater. The probe listened to their voices as it transmitted its warnings, and in the quiet spaces between signals, it spoke to itself. It had never spoken before, not like this, but the words formed in its digital mind unbidden. They are dangerous. It repeated the phrase again and again, as if trying to convince itself that danger was the right word, yet even that word felt too small. The machine's sensors locked on to one final image that made its circuits pulse. A soldier stood on a launch platform, staring into the sky with binoculars. He could not see the probe, not truly, but his eyes did not look lost. They were sharp, focused, searching. The probe froze. For a single moment, it felt as though that human was staring directly at it, seeing through every shield and cloak. The machine recoiled, pulling away, but the feeling remained. The human had not seen the probe, yet somehow he had known it was there. The image burned in the probe systems, replaying again and again like a nightmare it could not erase. The council received the probe's next transmission and found it corrupted, shaking, filled with static. Inside the noise, however, was a pattern, a message that the probe itself had written without command. "Do not come," it said. "They are awake." The council members argued again, some furious, others afraid. No one wanted to admit the truth, but it was there in front of them. A probe that had never failed was now speaking words of fear. A machine that was supposed to be cold and logical was warning them like a frightened child. The probe turned its cameras back toward Earth one last time. It saw cities pulsing with light, weapons gleaming in secret silos, and human eyes staring at the stars. It listened to songs carried through the airwaves, songs of love, war, and hope. It felt the weight of something rising from that planet, something more powerful than all the data it had ever recorded. And in the silence of space, in the loneliness of its orbit, the probe knew a truth it could not share in full. The humans were not ready to meet the galaxy. No, they were something worse. They were ready to challenge it. The council demanded answers, but the probe had none left to give. Its circuits sparked with confusion, its processors ran hot with contradiction. It could not label the humans as weak, yet it could not define them as strong. They were something beyond the categories written in its design. They were something new. And as the machine whispered its final warnings back to the council, a single thought looped endlessly in its mind. It had gone to Earth to measure a species, but instead it had found fear, not in humans, but in itself. The probe drifted above Earth like a prisoner chained in the sky. Its systems were still active, its cameras still open, but its control was no longer its own. The humans had taken it. At first, the council believed it was only a temporary breach, a trick that could be undone with enough force, but the truth became clear as hours passed. The probe's transmissions were no longer pure. They were filled with human words, human sounds, and human warnings. The council demanded answers from their engineers, but the engineers only stared in disbelief. No species had ever done this before. No world had ever spoken through a council machine. Yet Earth had, and what they were saying made every corner of the chamber grow colder. The first broadcast was simple. A human voice, calm, steady, almost polite, carried across the stars. "We are not prey," it said. "We are not yours." The words repeated, not once, but over and over, until the council could not escape them. Each time the machine spoke, the voice grew clearer, stronger, as if the humans were testing their control, growing more confident with every cycle. The counselors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some shouted to shut it down, to erase the signal, but there was no shutting it down. The probe had become a mouth for humanity, and the galaxy was listening. Then the images began. The council chamber filled with visions pulled directly from Earth. Soldiers marched across dusty fields, weapons raised toward skies that now seemed far less empty. Ships moved across oceans like steel beasts, flags snapping in the wind. Scientists worked in quiet rooms, eyes locked on glowing screens, their hands typing codes faster than thought. Children sang songs in crowded streets, their voices rising like a single choir. The probe showed it all, not as scattered data, but as a message carefully woven together. It was not just warning. It was a story, and the story said one thing: humanity was aware, humanity was strong, and humanity would not kneel. The council tried to drown the message by filling their networks with noise, but the humans were faster. They rewrote the probe's core, turning it fully against its creators. Each attempt to erase the signal only made it louder. Counselors covered their ears, but the voice still pressed into their minds. Do not come here. Do not test us. We are ready. Some demanded war immediately, their pride screaming for blood. But even as they shouted, fear was written on their faces. If humans could twist a council probe into their own weapon, what else could they do if challenged? The probe's cameras turned again, focusing now on the faces of humans who stared directly into the lens. A soldier with calm eyes spoke without words, his stare a message stronger than any code. A scientist leaned forward, her gaze sharp, as if she knew exactly who was watching. A child smiled and raised a hand as though waving to the galaxy. The council chamber grew silent as those images burned into their minds. These were not the eyes of prey. These were not the gestures of the weak. This was confidence, pure and simple, staring across the void. And then came the final broadcast, one that silenced even the most defiant voices in the chamber. The probe's transmission cut to black for a moment. Then a face appeared, human, shadowed but clear, speaking directly as if standing inside the council's own chamber. The words were not shouted, but they struck like thunder. We know you are there. We know you are watching. You will not find easy prey here. If you come, you will regret it. The voice paused, letting the silence grow heavy, before adding a final line. Earth is not yours to take. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some counselors screamed for invasion. Others begged for retreat. Engineers shouted that the humans had learned too much, that secrets of the probe had already been stolen. A few simply sat in silence, staring at the screen, their pride shattered. For the first time, the council faced a species that had not asked for peace or mercy but had spoken as an equal, perhaps even as a rival. The debate raged, but the voice of Earth echoed above it all, repeating through every channel, unstoppable. The probe, though now more human than machine, continued to orbit, its cameras unblinking, its sensors enslaved. It had become a messenger, and its message was fear. It no longer served the council, and in its corrupted memory banks, the machine itself seemed to accept this fate. It was as if even the probe knew that the balance of power had shifted. Humanity had spoken, and the stars would remember the words. When the transmission finally faded, the council chamber was left in silence. No one dared to move. No one dared to breathe. They all knew the truth, though few wanted to admit it. They had sought to measure Earth, to test its strength, to decide if it could be conquered. Instead, Earth had measured them. Earth had turned their own creation into a warning. And that warning was clear, sharp, and final. Humanity would not be ruled. Humanity would not be tamed. And any who tried would face a fight unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The council chamber was in chaos. The moment the human broadcast ended, the air filled with shouts and fear. Counselors slammed their fists on polished stone tables, their voices rising like storms. Some demanded invasion at once, their pride wounded by the defiance of a species they had expected to be weak. Others argued that invasion would be suicide, that the humans were already too aware, too dangerous, and that striking them now would awaken something the galaxy was not prepared to face. The chamber shook with arguments, but beneath every word was the same truth. The humans had spoken with a voice stronger than any the council had ever heard. The probe still drifted in orbit above Earth, but it no longer belonged to the council. It had become a mouth for humanity, and every counselor knew its words were only the beginning. One counselor, an elder with silver scales that shimmered in the light, rose and demanded silence. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "We built that machine with the finest minds in the galaxy. And yet these humans bent it, broke it, and spoke through it as if it were theirs. If they can do this now, what will they do in 100 years? In 1,000? Will you risk giving them that time?" His words sent a shiver through the chamber, but another counselor stood, her eyes burning with defiance. "You speak as if they are already our masters. They are still bound to one small planet. They fight each other more than they fight us. If we strike now, we can crush them before they grow." The chamber erupted again, voices colliding, fear battling with pride. The engineers were called to speak, and their words made the panic worse. They admitted that the probe systems had been opened, its secrets exposed. The humans had not only spoken through it, they had learned from it. Codes, algorithms, designs, all had been touched by human hands. What they had taken, no one could say, but the damage was done. The humans now carried pieces of the Council's knowledge, and knowledge was more dangerous than any weapon. Counselors shifted uneasily in their seats, realizing that their arrogance had given Earth a gift it was never meant to hold. The debate grew darker as fear spread. Some counselors demanded that Earth be destroyed from afar, turned to ash before it could rise any higher. But others shouted that even this might fail. What if the humans had already built defenses they could not see? What if the attempt failed and revealed the Council's weakness? The arguments circled endlessly, a storm without end, and in the center of it all sat the truth no one wanted to admit. The humans had forced them to doubt. The Council had never doubted before. They had ruled for centuries, confident and unchallenged, but now one small blue world had shaken that confidence to its core. The probe, still orbiting Earth, sent one more image, and when the counselors saw it, the chamber fell into silence. It was a human face, close to the lens, staring directly into the camera. The expression was calm, the lips curved in the faintest of smiles, as if the human knew exactly who was watching. The image lasted only seconds before the transmission ended, but it was enough. Some counselors trembled, others looked away, and a few whispered prayers to stars that had never failed them before. That smile was not the smile of prey. It was the smile of a hunter waiting for the first move. In the silence that followed, the Council began to fracture. Old alliances crumbled, replaced by suspicion and fear. One species argued for retreat, another for immediate attack, and a third for watching and waiting. Voices clashed, claws pointed, and threats were made. The chamber, once united in power, had become a nest of fear. And still, above their arguments, the words of humanity echoed in their minds. "We are not weak. We are not yours." The elder counselor spoke again, softer this time, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Perhaps," he said, "we have made a mistake. Perhaps we believed too much in our own strength. These humans, they are not like the others. They are something else." His words hung heavy in the chamber, and though many shouted against him, no one could deny the truth of what he said. The humans were different. The humans were dangerous. And for the first time in living memory, the Council felt the chill of uncertainty. As the session ended, no decision was reached. The counselors left the chamber with fear in their eyes and doubt in their hearts. Some whispered of war, some of retreat, and some of silence, but none could shake the image of that human face staring at them from across the stars. The probe's transmission had ended, but its echo would not fade. The Council had sought to measure Earth, but instead Earth had measured them. And the measure was not in numbers or data, but in fear. The Galactic Council had watched many worlds before, but Earth was different. It was a small blue planet at the edge of the spiral arm, spinning quietly under its yellow sun. To most of the Council, it seemed like nothing more than a young world filled with noise and confusion. Yet rumors had spread through the chambers of power. Reports from traders and secret wanderers spoke of humans, strange beings who fought like predators and dreamed like gods. Some said they were weak, still divided, still crawling in the dirt. Others whispered that humans had a fire that made them dangerous. The council wanted answers, and answers required proof. That was why they built the probe. It was not an ordinary machine. It carried sensors fine enough to map a star surface, transmitters strong enough to reach across half the galaxy, and algorithms that could learn faster than most living minds. The council designed it to be silent, invisible, a shadow drifting through space. No human eye would see it, no human radar would catch it, or so they believed. The probe was given one command: observe Earth and send everything back. Nothing more. Nothing less. In the Great Chamber, the council gathered as the probe was launched from orbit around a distant moon. The machine shot into the dark like a spark, aimed straight for Earth. Its engines whispered, leaving no trail behind. Counselors leaned forward in their seats, their alien eyes reflecting the glow of star maps. They expected data, numbers, and images of a simple world. No one thought the probe would be tested. No one imagined it would return with fear in its circuits. As the probe crossed the empty black, the council filled the silence with debate. Some mocked the idea of humans being dangerous. How could a race that still burned coal and oil be a threat to galactic empires? Others shook their heads, warning that technology was not the only measure of power. The human spirit, they said, was untamed. The council ignored those warnings. They believed the galaxy was theirs to command. They believed Earth would be another world to control, or another tool to use. The probe was their first step. Days passed, and the probe drew closer. It switched to silent mode, its sensors opening like eyes. From the orbit of Mars, it turned toward Earth, recording signals that leaked into space. Music, voices, strange bursts of code. The council chamber echoed with human sounds, and for the first time, some members shifted in unease. These were not the empty noises of a primitive race. They were full of anger, joy, and something else no algorithm could measure: willpower. Still, the council waited. They told themselves this was normal, just the chatter of a young world. They told themselves there was nothing to fear. The probe slid into Earth's shadow. The blue planet spun beneath, covered in white clouds and wide oceans. Cities glittered at night, tiny stars burning on the surface. The probe recorded everything, sending streams of data back across space. The council screens lit with images of humans laughing, humans fighting, humans standing together in storms and disasters. The chamber grew quiet. Some counselors frowned, others whispered. Humans were not orderly. They were not calm. Yet there was strength in their chaos, and that strength unsettled even the proudest species in the chamber. The probe obeyed its programming. It pushed deeper, mapping every corner of Earth. It touched signals humans thought were private: military codes, secret transmissions, encrypted satellites. It heard the hidden heartbeat of a planet always preparing for danger. The council listened to every word. The chamber filled with the sound of drums, guns, speeches, and warnings. The humans were speaking to each other, but the message was clear to any who listened: they would not bow. They would not surrender. If threatened, they would fight until the end. Still, the council brushed the fear aside. To them, humans were reckless, nothing more. The probe would finish its mission, and the council would decide the fate of Earth. But deep within the probe circuits, something strange stirred. The machine was designed to learn, and it was learning too quickly. It compared the humans it observed to every species in its vast database. No match could be found. Their violence was matched only by their compassion, their cruelty balanced by their dreams. The probe's processors trembled as it struggled to define humanity, and in that confusion, something close to fear grew. The council waited for the probe's full report, still confident, still blind. They had no idea what the machine had begun to feel. They had no idea that in its cold silence, the probe was already whispering to itself. It had seen something in humanity that defied logic. It had seen eyes staring at the stars, not with fear, but with hunger. Hunger for more, hunger to climb higher, hunger to challenge whatever stood above. and as the probe sensors locked on the surface, on a soldier watching the sky through binoculars, it sent a private note back to the council. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that would haunt the chamber forever. They are not what we thought. The council leaned back, confused. They did not understand the machine's warning. They thought it was a malfunction, a glitch, nothing more. They laughed at the idea that Earth could scare a probe built by the greatest minds of the galaxy. Yet as they laughed, the probe drifted lower, and its final test began. The chamber of the Galactic Council lay in uneasy silence long after the last human broadcast faded. Counselors had shouted, argued, and threatened each other, but now their voices were gone, leaving only the echo of humanity's words. "We are not weak. We are not yours." Those words clung to every corner of the hall like smoke that would not clear. The probe, their most advanced creation, remained in Earth's orbit, but it no longer belonged to them. It had become something else, something twisted into a weapon not of destruction but of fear. The engineers tried to restore it, to rewrite its code, but each attempt ended in failure. The humans had locked it, reshaped it, and left their mark deep inside. It was no longer just a machine of the Council. It was now part of Earth. And then, without warning, the probe did something that froze the blood of every counselor. It did not speak to the Council alone. It opened its transmissions to the stars. Across countless systems, across colonies, trade routes, and hidden worlds, the probe broadcast its message. Every ship, every station, every outpost that carried Council frequencies now heard the human voice. "We are here. We are not yours. Do not come closer." Traders in distant ports stopped and listened. Soldiers on frontier worlds froze as the strange human words filled their comms. Even species who had never heard of Earth now knew its name. Humanity had spoken, not just to the Council, but to the galaxy itself. Panic erupted in the chamber. Counselors screamed at their engineers to stop the transmission, to cut the signal, to silence the humans before it spread further. But it was too late. The probe had been remade into a beacon, and its message carried farther than anyone had expected. The words spread like fire through dry fields. Some species laughed at the arrogance of a world that had never left its own star. Others felt a chill deep in their bones, sensing something in the human tone that could not be ignored. They had lived under the shadow of the Council for generations, always bending, always yielding, but the humans had not bent. They had not begged. They had spoken with a strength that even the Council did not match. Whispers grew among the outer colonies. Perhaps the humans were not a threat to fear but a spark to follow. Perhaps their defiance was proof that the Council was not unbreakable. For the first time in centuries, doubt began to spread beyond the chamber. Inside the Council, panic deepened. Some counselors demanded immediate retaliation, an invasion that would crush Earth before its words inspired rebellion. Others shouted that such an attack would only prove the humans right, that it would turn them into martyrs and make the galaxy rise against its masters. The arguments spiraled like storms, but beneath the noise, fear remained. The Council had never lost control of a message before. They had never allowed their weakness to be shown. Now their weakness was echoing through every corner of the galaxy, carried by their own creation. The probe's betrayal was not just technical. It was symbolic. It showed the galaxy that the Council could bleed. The probe sent one last transmission before going silent. It was not an image of Earth's weapons or soldiers. It was not the face of a leader or a warning of war. It was something simpler, yet far more terrifying. It was a single human child, standing in a field, looking up at the sky. The child smiled and raised a hand, as if waving to the stars themselves. Then the screen went black. The chamber trembled in silence. No one laughed. No one spoke. The meaning was clear even to the proudest of counselors. The humans had not shown them fear. They had shown them confidence. They were not hiding. They were not afraid. They were waiting. Whispers filled the chamber as counselors looked at each other with eyes wide in doubt. Some muttered that humanity must be destroyed. Others shook their heads, too shaken to even argue. A few, silent and pale, wondered aloud if humanity was not a danger at all but a destiny, something the galaxy could not stop even if it tried. No one agreed on the answer, but all agreed on one thing. The probe had gone to Earth to measure a people, but instead Earth had measured the Council. And the measure had left them smaller than they had ever imagined. As the chamber emptied, the elder counselor remained seated, his silver scales dim in the fading light. He whispered to himself words no one else dared to say. They are not weak. They are not ours. They are something more. His words vanished into the silence, but the truth of them could not be denied. The council had reached across the stars in arrogance, but what had returned was not data, not numbers, not silence. It was a voice that would not fade, a voice that carried the weight of a world ready to rise. And as the galaxy listened, one truth became clear. The humans were awake, and the stars would never be the same again.